Hello, welcome to the first of the year edition of Really, I'm a Grandparent here on JLJ Media. I'm a grandparent and I'm James Lott Jr., as you guys know. We started this podcast last year. We have some great guests on here. And the requirement is becoming a grandparent in your 30s or 40s. That's the requirement. So I've had, I think, about 20 episodes already. They're out there. You can check those out on all streaming services or YouTube, JLJ Media. My guest today is the producer, star, showrunner, interviewer of According to Woods. He's been in some of my other shows, and he's my friend, Adam K. Woods. Hi, Adam.
Hey, James, and my goodness, I mean, we're both Tauruses. We both grew up in Inglewood, and I
I'm the
mean,
gap.
I
I'm the
just
gap.
yeah, I got the gap. I'm just saying. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing that's different is like my last name isn't Lot, and your last name isn't Woods. But otherwise, I mean, we've got it, man.
It's a lot of woods going on. That's all I gotta say. A lot of woods going on. Or
Some will say, which is the kind of premise of this very
oh
podcast,
my god,
isn't it?
it does lead into what we talk about. So we talk about people who are grandparents and who are young. And many of you guys know I became a grandparent at 30, and that was very young for me. And I've been a grandparent now for 20, almost 22 years. My oldest grandson will be 22 in April. He's a Taurus also. Will be at 82, yes. My granddaughter will be 16 in March, and my grandson will be 15 in September, and I have a new grandbaby being born at any time now, actually. So we're waiting to hear from my other daughter. So we're waiting to hear that. So it's kind of crazy. So I'll be a grandfather of four at 52 years old. Um, but I have a person who's a grandfather himself. We're going to talk. You want to hear his story because I'm talking to people. It's been fun. People who became grandparents different ways, different forms. What does that mean? We get all that going. So first of all, I have to establish, Adam Woods, how old are you currently?
I so 5'7", 85", which makes me 35
You'll be 30.
until
You'll be
May
36.
7th
Yeah.
this year, and then you can add another one to that thing. Yeah.
Yes. Now, when did you become officially a grandfather? What age?
Uh two 2 years ago, so I wouldn't say 33, right? Yeah,
All
33.
right. So first, I just want to find out first. I mean, did you ever think about? I mean, I never thought about grandparenthood yet. I mean, I thought that was way in the future, down the line. If I ever have that, I mean, down the line. When you found out, how was it for you?
I was I felt great. I mean, I don't know if it. So what I found out, right? I remember my uncle, my mom's oldest brother, basically telling me, you have your kids, you're young, so essentially, when they have kids, you'll still be able to enjoy them and play with them and be vital in their life, not just like a picture on the wall that they don't have a connection to, right? So that was it. And I later found out. I mean, it wasn't until I actually brought my grandson for the first time around my mom's side of the family, and the widow of my uncle, who unfortunately passed away some years ago. Uh, Basically, it was actually my grandmother's deal that said, "You have your kids young, enjoy them, and then when they have kids, you essentially enjoy them." Right. So that was something that was very impactful for me because my dad, he was 37 when I was born. Right. He was 12 years older than my mom. Uh, no, actually, 14 years older than my mom. So he was in his 30s, and then 40 when my mom passed away. And he had served in Vietnam. He was exposed to Agent Orange, like many of the boys who came back from that time. Even though he was stationed in Korea, not Nam, it
Yeah.
still happened. So my dad, I never until the day he passed away, I never saw him not writhe in pain from arthritis or diabetes and the complications of such. So that was something for me, and I was the act. My dad was an artist. He was a musician and whatever. I was like and he was 6'4", right? I was a little scrappy kind of punk, right? And I wanted to get in fights, play sports, all of this and whatever. And I'm only 5'9", even at 30 some odd, right? So, for me, if I couldn't get to where my dad was, right, physically, well, I'm going to basically occupy what he was before he passed away to my kids, right? A great grandfather. And in the vein of, like, I saw my uncle, the aforementioned
Yeah.
uncle, be a great grandparent to his grandchildren. I saw, I kind of drew from what my mom would tell me from my own grandfather on her side. I was just like, I gotta be awesome, right? And it's not just awesome, but like, I want to have a connection with this person. So thankfully it happened 2 years ago. And it's funny because all of my, not like it was a prerequisite. And for those that don't know, I'm kind of a wrestling and MMA head, right? Well, none of my kids, my wife either, none of them watch wrestling, none of them watch MMA. And again, that's cool because I don't want them to. Don't live vicariously for me. I'm not trying to. I have my own goals and dreams and whatever, and you should have yours as well,
Yeah.
right? So, with that all being said, this happens. It's like blessing happens where not only do I have a grandson, Abel Blue Jacoby, but he ever since he was like newborn has been the only one that will, if I'm watching something combat sports related, he's sitting right there with me.
There you go. I love it. I my oldest grandson Zayden, who I named, he is my. We're both left-handed. We're both Tauruses. Both have the gap in our teeth. He's taller than I am. You can watch us on Left Handed with a Lot to Say, my other podcast. We did an episode together a while back. It was kind of fun doing an episode with my grandson. That was a weird situation. It was wonderful. But because I had daughters, so in a way, I know how you feel. Like I didn't have sons, so I got a grandson. It's kind of like that's my son. I mean, I helped kind of raise him a little bit, and so I'm very much. I know what you mean. It's like I didn't get the regular folks to like what I like, but he does, and we have a sense of humor. He has like a sense of, we just he's and trust me, I love my granddaughter and I love my other grandson, of course. But it's kind of funny that I know what you mean. That what I didn't get through my kids, I got from a grandchild. That's a very interesting thing to get from your grandchild. So he's like so he likes to sit there with you, watch MMA and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just and again, it's so natural and whatever. And he'll even, anytime, because they live about 2 hours away from me, my daughter, my son-in-law, and Abel. But anytime that we're together, like I'm his jungle gym. Like he will just climb up on me. Like we've got this gimmick ever since he started walking. He would basically, and it's the same thing that I did with like my youngest son. Is when I would be standing there and hold my hands out instead of a hug. It's a backflip. So I hold their hands and I do an assisted backflip. So I'm almost repeating the same thing that I was doing with my son to my grandson. And again, he fits it so well. And it just happens. And it was even funny because the last time that Abel was here at the house, Owen is like, "Hey, Dad, we used to do that. You want to try it?" Now Owen is like, I think he's going to get my dad's height,
Okay.
because Owen's about right here. So
Oh,
trying to, I mean, theoretically,
yeah.
I was working out the geometry in my head, and he was just like, "Oh, I guess we're doing it, whatever." And I made sure that he didn't hit his head. So hashtag win,
Yeah.
hashtag win.
It's interesting. So what are you called?
So at first, so the my wife is she's bits of Puerto Rican, parts Tejano, parts Irish, Native American, and Filipino, right? So she wanted to be called Lola, even though she doesn't speak Tagalog or what have you. She grew up in the Central Valley of California, so she didn't get a lot of that. But so she wanted to kind of honor her heritage and the close relationship that she had with her grandfather, who's from like Cebu City, Philippines, and be called Lola, right? So I knew my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, as Ta. Ta and Na would be like the Fijian equivalents. At least I thought. But in that same interaction that I had with my uncle's widow, after presenting Abel to her, she basically told my wife that we called Ta just because that's what his kids called him, and Na Na, right? But the fact of the matter is, Na and Ta are actually father and mother, respectively. So we were calling our grandparents mother, father, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So my that got like pretty quickly got the kibosh, and it kind of broke my heart because like I grew up in the United States. My grandfather was my ta was in Fiji, so I thought that would be a way of, in addition to doing broadcasting and everything, just another way to honor my grandfather's legacy because he did broadcasting back in Fiji. And that got thwarted. So when it was like, just call me grandpa, then my wife was like, "You're too young for grandpa," and I was like, "Who says?"
Right. Well, as we talked before, I wasn't grandpa at first. I was like, I am too young for this shit. I'm going to be Papa Jamie. And I want to tell people, Papa wasn't popular for grandparent when I became a grandparent over 27 years ago. It's now become more in vogue to be Papa, Papa and Nana. My mother was Nana because we had too many grandmothers already and abuelas and all that. That was already going on. So to differentiate her, she was Nana. My grandmother was grandmother, but she was from Louisiana and would be called Medea, which is Medea.
Yeah.
But we call it, but her kids call her Mud. It's somehow this part in their Louisiana drawl. It becomes like it was Medea, but it became Mud, and it's become this thing. So, but I always called it. But when we were told she is grandmother, and now it's like it was no grandma, no, it's just grandmother. It's very Southern Belle, whatever that whole thing. So when it came out to me, I was like, I'm too young for this. I'll be Papa Jamie. Because I was brother Jamie to the younger kids. When my younger siblings, I was brother Jamie. So I was like, Papa Jamie works, even though I hated Jamie, but now it's been reclaimed in this instance. I was Jamie as a kid, I hated it, so I became James. But now I'm Jamie for the kids. So I'm Papa Jamie. They call me Papa sometimes by themselves, but it was always Papa Jamie, PJ, Papa Jamie. I like that. For jokes, they say Grandpa, of course, and Gramps. That's just for jokes. They think they're funny. Where do they get that from? No, they're smart
Sense
ass.
of
Where do they
humor.
get that from? But I'm Papa Jamie to them, and that's how it's always been. And I like it. I like the sound of it. My granddaughter did this for me. I just sent my thing. For Jamie, so
Aww.
she did that for me. So I always have. I mean, that's what stuck with me. And my great grandmother was Gigi, great grandmother. So it's always grandma and all these names now, but that's good. That's good for you to say. You're like grandpa. You're good. You don't care how old that is. I mean, but what do people say when you tell me your grandfather? I mean, I was shocked at first, but because I know how I'm one also. But I was like, oh, I guess you're a grandma. What do you think? You're so young. What do people say to you?
Well, first off, I get the, again, growing up in Inglewood, African descended a slave, part Fijian, but what have you. So people automatically assume that I was doing the hanky panky at 12, which is not the case.
Yeah,
That wasn't the case. So essentially, I met my wife. There's a 14-year age difference between us, right? And even though she looks younger than I, it's crazy. But she came into the relationship with three kids, 12, 9, and 7 at the time. Now they're, gosh, 26, just turned 26. Cyan is the only girl, and she is, God, 24. Yeah, 24. Evan will be 22 this July. So we've got that, and then so those are the older kids, right? So Lyle is the oldest, Cyan middle, only girl, Evan, right? And then bringing up the rear is the only one that has the Woods last name is Owen, and he's 13. He'll be 14 in September, right? So for me, it wasn't a big deal because like the older kids, I never basically had them call me dad or stepdad or anything like that. Like I just call me what you want to call me. Like you already have a dad. I'm not that. I'm just another dude that will help. It's like if it takes a village, I'm just
yeah,
another dude in the village, right?
yeah.
So they always call me Adam, right? And it's funny because like if you know me, you call me Woods. Even my wife calls me Woods, right? But the Adam is the only people that call me Adam is the older kids, right? So when Owen was born and started talking, he actually called me Addie. And I think just kind of mentally, it was a
Yeah.
combination of what he heard his older siblings call me and daddy. Like if my wife is telling me that's daddy, the first thing, it wasn't daddy, it was whatever, it was Addie. And he still calls me that to this day. So I'm good with that. Like I'd rather than me imposing my will upon you and what you know you want, like I want you to call me, like what I am to you or not to you or whatever. I want you to decide. To me, I just think that's a little bit more endearing that you call me what you want to call me.
No,
Yeah.
call me what you call me. I'm opposite. No,
Okay.
I'm like, no, my name is this. I don't give you don't give choice. Don't give kids choices. That's weird. That's that new school
Wait.
way. That's
In
that
in
new school
in
way.
America,
An American kids choices.
choices. What? Huh?
Choices.
What?
They start thinking for themselves. We don't want that happening. That's crazy. Um, no, it's funny. My mother. It's funny because okay, so my situation was my father was always daddy, but I called my mother by her nickname Bonnie. Her name is Bonita, which I call her Bonita now, but I called her Bonnie. And so it sounded close to mommy to me. So it was like daddy and Bonnie. It almost sounded like mine. So she never corrected me. She was like, you, just whatever, call me whatever you want. It's fine. And then my younger brothers, so they started calling her Bonnie also because they heard me, like you said, following along the thing. And people would get so pissed at her. At her. How could you do that? That disrespect. He goes, no, she goes, I get the science behind it. They're not being disrespectful. They feel like that sounds like mommy to them.
Yeah.
But see, I had a godmother who I called mommy.
Wow. Okay.
And I was out with her, and she was Chinese. So I was out with her. I go, mommy. So now they look at me at first and go, okay, maybe. The eyes, the skin color, whatever. And
Yeah.
I whatever they got first. But then I'd be with her and my godfather, who was Japanese. We're like, this is the 70s. Like, how does that happen? But my mom and I are twins. If anybody's seen pictures of us online, you can tell we're twins. So, they know I'm hers. But so again, I know she's my mother. Um, but she used to call her mother by her name, Mitzi.
Really?
So it's one of those things. I think I heard her do it. So it's one of those things. You're right. So you kind of hear, but it's like, but again, it was not a thing. But my grandparents were all grandma and grandpa and where they were all that. When it came to the parents, though, my father was the only one I called daddy. I call him dad to this point. We don't talk about him, but when I do, he's dad. Very interesting.
Well, I think it's it's funny that you said it's like a very new school way about it, right? But I had Georgia Smith on my podcast, the daughter of the British Bulldog, and Diana Hart, Brett and Owen Hart's sister, right? And they call her and her brother Harry basically called their dad Davy because that's what they saw him on TV, the British Bulldog on TV, and that they saw him more on TV than they did at home,
Right.
because of the scheduling or whatever. So they just called him Davy, and it's funny too because also Diana, Brett and Owen's sister, and all of the Hart kids, they call their they call the patriarch Stu Hart is Stu Hart. He's not grandpa. He's not dad or whatever. To other people he's that. But to them he's Stu. Like they refer to him as his first name. So there's that. You've got people of Spanish speaking culture, right? They're all siblings, same mom, same dad, and it's something that like I always wondered about, never really thought to ask, but they're like my mom,
No,
my
we
dad,
say it all the time. We say it
you
all the
know
time. Yeah.
right. And it's but it's just growing up with a lot of Latinos, Latinx, and what have you, different Latin origin, Spanish speaking origins. Like I was just like, okay, that's just what they do, and I guess another bit of the heartstrings where I'm good with grandpa is literally the week before my dad passed away. He ended up passing Christmas morning of 2010, early, like 3 in the morning, right? And I was for people that don't know, right? North he was living in Northridge, and we were with him at the house because we had just put a deposit in our place, and we are going to move into our place literally like the week before New Year's, right? The last week of December, and what have you, right? So we were staying with my dad, and I was going from Northridge all the way to Marina Del Rey on the bus to go to work, 4 hours each way, right?
Oh,
So it was just like, it was, my my wife, my kids, my dad, my sister in this place in Northridge, right? Right after my dad passes away, and I don't even remember how it got brought up, but my wife tells me that my because Owen, like I guess his only blood grandchild, they were all his grandchildren, all four of them, and he got along with especially the oldest Lyle even better than I could. But I remember my wife telling me that he would basically be sitting at the computer with Owen, and he was two at the time, and basically trying to get Owen to call him grandpa. He wanted to hear it. And I think he might have known like his mortality was essentially getting tested. Like and I don't know if he knew how long he would have, but I know I think in retrospect, he felt like he basically was on borrowed time. So he just wanted to hear before he left this earth, grandpa from his blood grandson. Right. And maybe that's why I'm okay with just being grandpa, because my son Owen called him, like the older kids called it Grandpa Ross. That was, Ross Woods was his name, so Grandpa Ross for the older kids, and he was fine with that. And then my son, like Owen, the youngest, basically called him Pop Up for whatever reason. Like, and we, in our house we didn't use it or whatever. He just said Pop Up, right? So, but it was so important to my dad that he would spend hours with Owen just so he can hear it. Yeah, I mean, just maybe a smidge of nepotism before he met his maker, just to hear grandpa. And that stung out to me, and it's still something that I mean, it pings at my heart, because when my sister and I were young, that was his dream, is just to live enough so he can see his grandchildren. So maybe that's why I'm okay with grandpa.
well, it's funny. It's just funny because there is something to be said by names, and my girls call me daddy or dad or whatever. So I like that, but I don't know. My older grandson is trying to call me James now,
Okay.
and so I don't like it. And I tell him, but and he goes, well, you call Grandma Bonita, and I said, yes, I do. And I thought, don't do as I say, that kind of thing. I always like that. So, but it just because I liked being called Papa Jamie. There's something different about it. It's like I don't want to take away from our relationship. It's the same, it's whatever. But there is something in a name, and I think for me, it felt it was our own type of thing that's not I don't have anybody else. It's
Right.
like you guys are very specifically my grandchildren. So
Yeah.
I kind of liked having the Papa label. I mean, I liked, I hate labels in general, but I liked it. It's ironic. It's weird. I found I liked it when he started calling me James a little bit last year or so. I go, I don't like that. I'm like, I'm Papa Jamie. I don't like that. But I also know that people go through stages.
Yeah.
So Papa Jamie may come back later. It's one of those things where it's like, right now you're feeling yourself, you're young, so at some point it may come again, you know, and so I have
Yeah.
to for that. It's fine.
Yeah. And I don't know. And it's weird, right? Where because you were like, oh, for the older kids to, you know, just call me whatever, like that is a bit of new school, but maybe that's a little bit of old school that is like in my ear, right? That
Good
just
for you.
grandpa. You
Yeah.
can't get any more traditional, at least in this country, than grandpa. Like no other iteration. I mean, obviously there's papa, there's different euphemisms
Grandfather.
and everything, right? Right. But I mean, as far as like traditional, that's it. Maybe that's it. Even in a new school world, having some of that old school mentality kind of permeate.
I don't know. I always, for me, the big thing I try to teach my grandkids is manners. I think there's a lot of manners lost these days in these next generations. They just don't. I liked ma'am and sir. I liked, calling by an adult by their, Mrs. So and so, or even, in a black culture, a lot of times, you would say Miss Susan, Miss Helen, Miss. I mean, I grew up with that. I mean, that's what I grew up with, and that's a term of endearment. Also, it's like, oh, there's Miss Brooke, hi Miss Brooke, hi. There's Miss Esther, hi Miss Esther. But I still do that sometimes with some of my clients, my older black clients. I'm like, okay, Miss Gina, what's going on? And they love it. I mean, they love it. It's a sign of respect for the elders, and I think we need to teach that to our kids. I think that's getting lost somewhere. So I guess for me, if even if it seems ridiculous or whatever for a lot of people, I feel like I'm Papa Jamie. Call me that, and don't call me nothing else. And that's just how it is, because that's how I was taught to you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I feel like there's something. I think they'll appreciate it later. As I said, I know kids go through stages. Um, I call my mother mommy sometimes now, and I mean, we're both old at this point. But I'm saying it cyclically. It went around to, I'll go, hey mommy, what's going on? And so hello
Yeah.
son, and we kind of do that all the time. And it's I didn't call her mommy my whole life. Now it comes out with, okay mother, what's going on? I never called her that. So now I am. So I'm saying I get up to myself. It's cyclical. It's just sometimes just it depends on your type of life, your time of your life.
Yeah.
You, I guess. But
Yeah.
but either way, so so I had a really good grandfather. So I had somebody who, my grandpa Bob. I was very close to him. He was great, and that helped me a little bit with my grandchildren. You mentioned a little bit about some of the elders in your family and stuff. But now you have no parents or grandparents, right?
No,
By
no.
above you.
Yeah. So okay. So it's I want to say within a 5 year period, or maybe even longer than that, like all of my grandparents passed away. So I remember my grandpa Bill probably being the first to go, and that was Bill or William Woods, um, and that would had to be probably like 95 ish. So I want to say like a 10 year period, right? So 95 ish is when he passed away. Shortly that so that was the Wood side of the family. That's the paternal side. Then it was my na Latia. She passed away in I want to say it was like 97, right? Then it was before I was out of middle school, which had to be what 98. It was essentially my grandma Hazel, on my dad's side, right? And then the last holdout, which is the one that I in my life ended up becoming the most like,
Okay.
is my ta Wame Wangani Sanini, right? And he passed away literally a few months before my high school graduation. So that was 2003. So from 95, 96 ish to 2003, I lost all of my grandparents. But then again, I didn't, I didn't, because I grew up, we grew up all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So San Francisco, Fiji, Indiana, Las Vegas, New
Right.
Mexico, Georgia, LA, right? So I didn't have that close interaction with it. Like I remember grand my grandfather William basically coming to San Francisco one time when I was like maybe in grade school, maybe kindergarten aged, right? Um, then I didn't get any interaction with Hazel until I mean, she called a couple times a year and everything for Christmas and holidays and what have you, but didn't really get close to her until we moved to Indiana when I was about third grade-ish, right? And then Na and Todd, they even though they were the furthest away, I feel like I had the closest relationship with them, because not only did they love my dad, obviously they loved their daughter, right? But I remember getting the envelopes, the barber pole envelopes, red, white, and blue edges and everything from
Yeah.
Fiji with all the stamps. And I mean, as a kid, I was collecting the stamps because they were cool and oddly shaped than the ones that we got here in the U.S. and
Yeah.
whatever. And I just knew that was something special. There'd either be like a Fijian dollar bill or pictures or what have you. Because I mean, 20 years before social media, so
Yeah.
that's that that's essentially what was it. So and then my mom would go and get calling cards and what have you, and call home. So like I remember, especially when we were in San Francisco, usually about Sunday night was when we, right before I went to bed, I got to talk for 15 minutes with my grandparents, which was like, that was gold. That was
Yeah.
absolutely gold. So, but other than that, like I didn't really have too many interactions with my grandparents. Um, so it's kind of left me, and maybe that's where I get like a rebellious spirit, where like I don't really have anybody to answer to, like, and that's why I don't know, man. And sometimes it pings, not just because
I
my
was
parents.
like, aren't you an orphan? Like, I feel like an orphan on some
I
level.
No, absolutely. Like I don't know what it is. Even though my parents both came from big families, right? My dad of 9, I think my mom of 7 kids, right? They both came from big families, but they they just had my sister and I. Um, but there are reasons why they left. You
Yeah.
know, their homestead, right? So I think it was their I don't want to say disillusionment with it, but like that was that. So I get weird. I get weirded out when people are like, "Oh, I'm gonna go see family over the holidays," or "We're going on vacation," or whatever. Like I don't. I've never had that, and even vacation is like literally that was my mom's like soft shoe way of telling us we're moved. Your friends that you had in the last place, we're probably never gonna see again, right? So like those are the two things. Like, oh, getting together around the holidays with your family, it's weird, so weird. Same thing with the vacation.
Yeah. I'm finding that I'm becoming one of the top generations now by elimination. Grandparents are gone. My mother lost several sisters and brothers. I mean, like it's literally she's one of the few. I have one great aunt, and that's it. My aunt Faith in Pacifica. And then my mom.
Pacifica?
Oh yeah, I love Pacifica. Yeah.
That's where my parents met.
Wow. At Seaball. I'm just kidding. Um,
See?
I know. I don't. I go to Pacifica. Well, because of COVID, I've been there over a year. But I was there last Christmas. I was there. I love
Wow.
Pacifica. Right off the highway. My aunt lives on Crespi Drive, right across the street from the beach. The beach is like right over there. We go to Kinney's for our Chinese food, and I mean I know all about Pacifica, all about it. And friends there.
Yeah, so I guess here's another weird one, right? Because getting involved with the media. So my parents, when they met, they both worked for the Guggenheim family.
Oh, okay.
For those in the know, they own the San Francisco Giants, but definitely the San Francisco Chronicle,
Yeah.
right? So I guess this like whole kind of broadcasting thing, it
Yeah.
was sprinkled in, what
Yes.
have you, but it was at a company party for like all of the, it was like, it was not an official, it was just all of the workers in the different departments, they just went to gather at a house for the holidays, and that's how my parents met in Pacifica.
Yeah. A lot of folks know Pacifica because Pacifica is folks is south of San Francisco.
Yes.
It's still part of the Bay Area. It's really
Yes.
beautiful, small seaside town. You just take Highway 1 out,
Hmm.
past Daly City and everything, go right out to San Diego, go that direction. You can go down to, a lot of people know Half Moon Bay, which is further down.
Right.
Same direction, just keep going south. You'll hit Half Moon Bay. But it's a great town. I was there last Christmas. I miss it. It's been a long time. My aunt's a high auntie, she's up there. Um, but I do know what it's like to have nobody above me. So I am now one of the elders.
Mm.
And it's like, how did that happen? I'm only 52. Why did that happen? But so now I have these. But also another thing that was strong for me was that I have a family tree after me now. Like I have
Yeah.
our branches that come out of me, and there it goes. It'll say James Lott Jr. baby mamas, and then it goes that direction down to my kids and grandkids and their spouses. And it's like this is kind of crazy that I have like this tree after me actually. So when I go, I'm somebody's grandfather, I'm somebody's father,
Yeah.
possibly somebody's great grandfather at some point, or somebody's. It'll be very interesting to see if the lineages continue. But it shoots out of my arm. It's like that's kind of a trip.
Yeah, and I mean it's a direct link, right? It's not something that is like three removed,
Right.
three generations removed or whatever. That is like it's literally you're the branch, right? And I kind of feel the same way too, because like you're talking to a guy that literally ditched school to go ahead and watch all of the showings of the first Jackass movie,
Oh,
right?
hey, there you go. Yeah.
Right, and then after, I mean, like literally like 11 o'clock at night, again, this is not hyperbole. I went to every single showing. So from 10 a.m.
Hilarious.
to like, I think it was like the last one was like 1, and just like snuck in. I paid for one, snuck in, stayed the whole day because why not?
I
Um,
could do that, especially
right,
then.
absolutely. And then our my friends and I, we basically did the things like literally from the three like the theater at South Bay in Gardena, California, all the way, and we walked back home to Inglewood at like 3 in the morning. And we were doing that, right? But then somehow I became I'm not going to say responsible, but I know people have used that in reference to me, which I'm like, I shot bottle rockets out of my butt. Like,
Yes.
what are we doing?
Yes. It's so funny. Oh my god. Yeah, it's a trip. I again didn't plan for this. Wasn't like it wasn't. I knew I wanted to have kids one day at some point. I knew all that stuff, but I didn't plan on anything after that. I just wasn't a thought, and so well now it's a thought. I mean, they thought it up and decided to have sex and do it, obviously. But I just didn't think about that. It just wasn't even a thought for me, and now I can't imagine them not here. I mean, I can't imagine it. It's just so it's like they're extensions of me, and I see my personality in each of them. Even though they're not my kids, they're
Yeah.
my kids' kids. And the new one coming, I'm curious to see. It's a boy, so I'm going to see. So I only have one granddaughter. It's so funny, and she does have me wrapped around her finger. That's my granddaughter Scarlett has it wrapped around her finger. But I'm like another boy. So I wonder how that's going to be. And also, we're curious what it's going to look like. So the child is part whatever I am, obviously, and my daughter, the mother's side, which is there's Spanish and black and this and white and everything, and the father is Jamaican and Filipino. So we're very curious to see what this kid's going to look like. Or like it could look like anything.
Yes.
So I have two blonde grandchildren that came out of nowhere, and then I have one dark haired. So we're like all these mixtures. We just don't know. You know how it is. You don't know what's going to happen. So we're very curious to see what this little child's going to look like. Let's say the least. And yeah,
It's funny that you mentioned that, right? Because so my daughter Cyan, you know, she you can tell there's she might look like her birth father, because that's genetically, girls take after the dads, boys
right.
take after their
Yeah,
moms in
right,
terms of physically. But she's my wife. She's a like my wife is like essentially very like she grew up like apostolic and everything, so very
right. Okay.
like it's very
Yeah.
strict. So my daughter Cyan is essentially like my wife without the strictness of the religion,
Okay.
right? So just the strictness of life, right? So her husband Swan, he's of German descent, right? So
Okay.
he's Anglo, and it's funny. Abel looks so. We made a pact with my dad to not cut Owen's hair, and
Okay.
right before my dad passed away, like the last, I want to say 5 years of his life, he basically went from like being clean cut to like borderline Frederick Douglass, like that was just it, right? So he made us have a pact that we don't cut Owen's hair, and we haven't. I think in 13 years of Owen's life, he's had literally one trim, right? So with Abel, I guess they were doing that for a little bit, right? And then much like my dad did to me, right? I used to have like nice, like wavy, no kinks. Like I had good hair. I had good hair, right? And then my dad had this bright idea. It was like, oh well, he's a boy, whatever. I'm gonna cut it. And after that, my hair never grew back the same. I got essentially black hair from that moment on, right? So fearing this, I was just like, hey, you might not want to cut Abel's hair, right? And it's funny because Abel has this one like spot in like right in the back of his head, right, where he essentially has like literally kinky, curly, almost like troll boy steel wool, like right there, and everything else is wavy. Now that they've cut his hair, he actually looks like Tom Hanks from Big.
Okay. Okay.
He's very fair complexion, very cherubic in the face and everything. But he reminds me of like Tom Hanks, either Big or Bosom Buddies. Take your pick.
Buddies.
Same kind of era, Tom Hanks. But yeah,
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
I thought it was great.
Who's from Sacramento?
Yeah, there you go.
His family owns Harlow's. That's a whole thing. I know he's from Sacramento. That's so funny. That's so funny. As we end this, what is one piece of advice you would give to young grandparents? Because it's very different than being older. When you're younger, you're still out there, presumably living your life, maybe still raising kids of your own, and you become a grandparent. What would that be like for you?
Do the best you can. Do the best you can. Because here's the honest to goodness truth, and I don't mean to throw salt or shade on her life predicament, but here's the thing: Paris Hilton, facts, right? She was given everything. Not just her was given everything, but her father was given everything, right? And she still ended up with the whether it be substance abuse, trouble with the law, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not trying to highlight somebody's, like a dark period in their life. But I say that to say is if you can give somebody everything and it still go awry, then that's it. Oh, you can do the best you can. You know, sometimes, it's in one ear, out the other. But, if you start just like anything, just like projects that we have as creative people, what have you, you throw enough dookie on the wall, essentially something's going to stick, right? And some of that stuff that they might have hum and ha and roll their eyes at will be the sage advice that they will be telling their grandchildren about you, right? And that becomes your enduring legacy. So I think that's that, like not to look, of course, have fun
Yeah.
short term, right? Have fun short term, but long term, it's just like again, every what you will mean to this child is great, and you might have not had great relationship with your grandparents or your parents or whatever. All that stuff it should get eradicated once you have this new being of life. And if it doesn't, that's it too. Everybody has their reasons. But I say that all to say, do you, boo boo, do you.
There you go. Tell people where they can find you, Woods, on social media and your shows.
According to Woods, literally across all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And I believe there's even a Twitch. Yes, I do have Twitch. So according to Woods, on literally everything. And yeah, but you guys should see everything that JLJ Media is producing and subscribe to that. I'm subscribed. You should be subscribed too. And if you don't know, now you know.
Thank you. I'll just say anything. Thank you very much. And you can find me where all James Lott Jr.'s are sold at James Lott Jr. on all the social media platforms, including TikTok, folks. Follow me on TikTok. What I can say about that. And love your grandchildren. Like if you have grandkids, love them. If you have grandparents, love them too. I miss my grandparents. Actually, I really do. I was close to them. I miss my grandparents. So if you love your grandparents, they're still around. Make sure you tell them that. If you have any grandkids, make sure you tell them you love them today. And everyone, go in love. We'll see you next time.